July 2019, the Swedish weather station located north of the Arctic Circle recorded a temperature of 34.8 degrees Celsius. At the same time in New York, the temperature was 35 degrees. Shocking, isn't it? When you consider that in the same period of time, the range of the Arctic sea ice shrunk to a size never seen before, you will see a more complete picture of the changes taking place. This is really happening. The glaciers are in a very bad condition. On the internet, you can find photos of hungry and exhausted polar bears facing the degradation of their natural habitat. The Arctic is melting. Every year, scientific expeditions from around the world study the changes taking place in the Arctic. This year, scientists from the Institute of Oceanology of the Polish Academy of Sciences in Sopot, in cooperation with Lithuanian researchers from the University of Klaipėda, took part in a project called Adamant. Its goal was to analyze the effects of glacier retreat on the ecosystem and biology of Western Spitsbergen. The Polish research vessel Oceania, belonging to Passio, has been visiting the Arctic regularly for over 30 years. This three-masted ship, built in 1985, was designed to withstand the toughest conditions. You will find devices made for conducting all sorts of scientific tests, from chemical and biological analysis, optical and acoustic measurements, to hydrographic surveys. After reaching the first measuring station in Gipsvika Bay, it's time for the research to begin. With the help of an underwater scoop, samples of the seabed are collected, along with all living organisms. The mud from the ocean floor is then inserted into the scrubber, where in streams of water, the organisms are separated by special fine sieves and placed in labeled containers. After the expedition, the samples are tested in a lab and compared with those from 30 years ago. The collection of the sediment core is another important test. Each layer of the sediment core, cut out and placed in separate container, corresponds to the period in which the mineral particles and dead organisms fell to the bottom of the ocean. 1 centimeter of sediment in the Spitsbergen fjord takes about a year to form. Scientists view the bottom of the fjord with a special drop camera. They are looking for any organisms that appear in places from which the glacier withdrew. The expedition leader and director of the institute, Professor Jan Marcin Węsławski, is a specialist in the field of the sea coasts, trophic networks and crustaceans. Has been visiting the Arctic regularly since 1977, spending a total of over 45 months in polar countries. This allowed him to witness crucial, man-made changes in this part of the world. During each trip to the mainland, you have to be attentive and focused. This is not an ordinary walk. Andrzej Kruszewicz, the director of the Warsaw Zoo, who is taking part in the Arctic expedition for the first time, is responsible for the team's safety. The chance of a direct encounter with a polar bear in this area is rather small, but you should always be cautious. The leader of the Lithuanian group, Sergei Olenin, finds many plastic items from various parts of Europe. For scientists, they are more than just rubbish. Large pieces of plastic can become vessels on which new organisms travel to the Arctic coast from warmer regions of the Atlantic.
No drifters.
Professor Węsławski is looking for the Atlantic gammaras under the coastal rock. The presence of this small crustacean, until recently only living in the warm Atlantic Ocean, is irrefutable evidence of climate change in the Arctic. For the second part of the expedition, we move on board the polar yacht Magnus Zaremba. This 17-meter yacht was designed to resemble the legendary Fram, built for Nansen and later used by Roald Amundsen. If trapped in ice, its hull, just like a cork, will jump to the surface to avoid being crushed. Eugeniusz Moczydłowski is not only a yacht captain with 40 years of experience. He is a doctor of biological sciences, a fauna researcher in Antarctica, and a long-time employee of the Polish Academy of Sciences. Magnus allows us to reach the wild, less accessible regions of Spitsbergen. Here, a group of Lithuanian scientists implement the next stage of the project. Thanks to the multi-beam probe on the ship's hull, the seabed is scanned for what is likely to appear here for the first time. In the evenings, Lithuanian researchers document the occurrence of plastic, describing and indexing the samples. During this time, other participants of the expedition are preparing a meal for the tired crew. Arctic glaciers react quickly to changing climatic conditions, which makes them important indicators of global warming. A temperature increase of only 1 degree centigrade, from 0 degrees to +1, causes the melting of large masses of ice. Some glaciers recede up to 500 meters every year. When glaciers, which stored fresh water for more than 2.5 billion people, disappear, the process will be irreversible and its effect dramatic. Collecting and analyzing samples is a tedious job, but this kind of work is necessary to understand the processes associated with global warming. The process of colonization of the Arctic by small organisms is one of the first symptoms of climate change. While field research is ongoing on land, the second part of the expedition prepares to work with the underwater robot. This robot explores the seabed after the glacier has subsided, along with the foreign organisms which began adapting to new conditions. The structure of the food chain is changing, and the consequences for the Arctic fauna are unknown. The Arctic is the kingdom of the polar bear. Traveling along the coast, every now and then we find traces of his presence, although meeting a bear eye to eye is increasingly difficult. The disappearance of sea ice forces drastic changes in the behavior of this endangered species. Ice is the bear's home. It is where they hunt, rest, and nurture the young. When the ice run out, the polar bear will disappear from the Arctic, having no access to seals, its most important food source. For now, you can still find various species of animals in the Arctic. All of them are worth protecting, but those living underwater deserve our special attention. While the land looks like a barren desert, what happens underwater resembles life in exotic warm seas. There is no doubt that the Arctic is melting, although ice has consistently covered it for the last 800,000 years. What will the effects of global warming be? The consequences will be felt especially by future generations. Winters will become shorter. When the temperature rises, there will be heavy rainfalls causing flooding in many areas. There will be more avalanches and landslides. Weather phenomena will become more dramatic. Glaciers will continue to melt and seawater level will rise. Without the cold polar regions, the current world system will change. The overall effects are very difficult to predict. Will the temperature in Svalbard rise by 10 degrees by 2100? Professor Wensławski believes that it's likely. He is one of the people who have been experiencing climate change-related problems for many years. So much has changed since he was walking on the ice-covered surface of the Baltic Sea. Scientists are trying to tell the world about what they have known for many years. Shall we finally listen?